Yesterday, I got to officiate the wedding of a kid I've known since he was in the 6th grade. And when you've known a kid since they were in the 6th grade, you don't know how they end up getting married at all. Like how any girl would ever say yes to them. There's no chance I would have let this guy marry one of my daughters. But somehow he convinced some girl to do it. And I got to officiate that wedding. And I love officiating weddings, love getting to be a part of that. But here's what I learned somewhere along the way. There's one expectation of pastors at weddings, and it's this. Please don't talk that much. Like, can you just keep it pretty short? Because we'd really like to get to the vows and the kiss and the pictures and the reception and all the things. So, keep it tight. You know what? I've never cared about that expectation. That's never stopped me from talking as long as I feel like talking. Because in marriage, I'm just looking at this young couple about to walk into the rest of their life, one of the most beautiful and hard things they're ever going to do. And I just want to give them good expectations. Like, I just want to pass on to them, here's what you're walking into. Don't be afraid if in the first year you fight more than you thought you would. It's normal, right? Like, it's normal. Good expectations are really good. But I'm looking at them. They're standing right in front of me, and I can see their eyes just glazing over as I'm talking. They're not listening to a word I'm saying. I wasn't listening to a word the pastor was saying at my wedding either. I totally understand that. And it's just falling on deaf ears. One time I was doing a wedding, and I did the homily, and then I said, all right, now, y'all turn toward each other and we can do the vows. And the bride literally said out loud, finally, just like that. Which I don't know if that was directed at me. I'm sure it was about just engagement in general. But it's a burden that I want to prepare them. That's what Jesus is doing in Matthew chapter 10. These disciples are about to go out on mission for the first time, and he has this burden to prepare them for this beautiful but hard but totally worth it experience that they're about to walk into. He wants to give them good expectations. He wants to make sure that when they walk in and it's harder than they thought, that they aren't surprised by that. So I want to show you in this passage 7 expectations that Jesus lays out for his disciples and for us as they walk on mission. Yes, I did say 7. We will be out of here by about 2 or 2:30. It'll be totally fine. I started with 9, if that makes you feel any better, but we've got 7. So we're going to walk through them very quickly. One at a time. Number one expectation from this passage for living on mission with Jesus is to expect opposition. Expect opposition. Matthew 10, verse 16. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and before kings for my sake to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. I mentioned doing youth ministry with youth group kids. I got to lead a lot of mission trips. And before we'd leave on a mission trip, we would do all these meetings to prepare them for the trip. And here was the basic gist of that meeting. Just do what I say, go where I tell you to go, be where I tell you to be when I tell you to be there, and you'll have a great trip. You'll get home safely, probably. You won't get into any danger. Like, it'll be a great trip. Just listen to what I say. Jesus gathers his disciples on what is effectively their first mission trip, and his message is this: just do what I say, but actually it's gonna lead you directly into danger. It won't be safe at all. In fact, you should expect opposition on this mission that I am sending you into. That should be a good expectation for you. Have you ever heard the phrase before, the center of God's will is the safest place that you can be? If you've been around church, maybe you've heard that phrase. I don't know how you can honestly read the Bible and think that phrase is remotely true. Eternally, absolutely. Center of God's will, safest place you can be, eternal perspective. On earth, you live in the center of God's will, and Jesus says it will lead you into hard places and toward people who will oppose you. Just think about the life of Jesus. Nobody lived more in the center of God's will than Jesus, and where did it take him? Right to a cross. We should expect it. Opposition in this world. And we think about these disciples, these 11, when you take out Judas, 11 men that are standing before Jesus. When he says, expect opposition if you go and live on this mission. Here's what church tradition tells us happened to these 11 men. They were obedient to carry the message as far as they knew to the ends of the earth. And here's the result. James was killed by the sword by King Herod. Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. Thomas was speared to death in India. Bartholomew was headed in Armenia. The rest were beaten, beheaded, or crucified. Only John escaped martyrdom, and he was thrown into exile on the island of Patmos. So they Good thing Jesus laid out this expectation for them because their life ended in opposition and ultimately in death. And this is not just ancient history. Todd prayed this just a second ago, but we forget this, that we live in a country that does not experience this kind of persecution, but we still live in a world that does. In 2025, 13 Christians on average a day were killed for their faith. 13, every day. 4,849 believers that we know of killed in 2025, almost 3,500 of those in Nigeria alone in 2025. Jesus says, expect opposition. Now, here's the reality. We have to apply this to us. We don't live in Nigeria, right? More than likely, opposition will not look like death for you, but it will look like getting passed over for a professional opportunity because you hold fast to your convictions. It will look like getting marginalized socially because you live differently than the rest of the world. It will look like people talking about you behind your back because you're different and weird. There's a form of persecution, although not as dramatic, that we will also experience, and we have to face the same question that they had to face. When following Jesus becomes costly, will we remain faithful? Because Jesus tells us we're gonna be opposed. And he said we're being sent out like sheep. We talked about sheep last week. Not very smart, very defenseless. And Jesus says, I'm sending you among wolves. But here's what he says. He says, be wise and be innocent as doves. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Look at those one at a time. First of all, be wise. You're walking into trouble, but don't bring trouble on yourself. Be thoughtful about how you present this message. Be thoughtful about the way you present this message. Be thoughtful about the tone in which you present this message. Later on in the passage, Jesus is going to say, all men will hate you because of me. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, all men will hate you because of you. Like, don't bring opposition on yourself. Last time I checked the list of the fruit of the Spirit, being a jerk was not on the list. Like, it's a different set of words. So you will be opposed, but make sure it's not because of you and the way that you live out this faith. Be wise, but also be innocent. Make sure that the content of your message and your character align. You know, one of the great things about being a pastor and a preacher is that I know every Sunday I'm going to be standing up here, and it's not my primary motivation, but one good thing about having to preach every Sunday is when I'm tempted to fall into sin, one motivation not to sin is this: I'm going to have to stand up here and preach on Sunday. And how can I look at you and preach this if I'm living in sin? And so motivation for all of us as followers of Jesus is this: make sure the content of what you're saying and the character behind it align. Be innocent as doves. So expect opposition. Expectation number 2, expect power. Expect power. Verse 19, when they deliver you over, don't be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of the Father speaking through you. There's a specific promise in this passage, and then I think a principle that we can live by. The specific promise to the disciples is, you're gonna be dragged into court, you're gonna be thrown before a jury, and when you're in that moment, don't worry, the Spirit will come and he will give you power to speak what you need to speak in that moment. You don't have to plan ahead of time. I think the principle is this: when we get sent out on mission and we're living beyond our resources and beyond our capabilities and beyond our power, the promise is that the Spirit will come and meet us and empower us for that moment. So you think about your 3, 2, 1. And the one person that you have that you want to have a gospel conversation with, and you've played out that conversation in your head 1,000 times, right? Here's what I'm going to say. Here's how I hope they respond. And then your armpits start sweating and your heart starts beating and you think, I know I'm going to be awkward. I'm always awkward. Like, I'm going to ruin it. I'm not going to know what to say. They're going to ask me some apologetic question I'm not going to know the answer to, and we get all worked up, right? Here's the promise when you go out and talk to that person. Not don't prepare, not don't think ahead about what you're going to say, but the Spirit will meet you with power to give you the words for that conversation. We have to trust that. We have to trust that we may be inadequate, but we will never be alone. God goes with us through his Spirit. There's this great moment in the book of Joshua where the people are about to cross into the promised land, and they're standing before the Jordan River, and the river is raging, and they need to get to the other side of the river. And God says to the priests, I want you to lead the people carrying the Ark of the Covenant across the Jordan River. Here's how you're gonna do it. Not Oregon Trail style by fording across. If you ever played Oregon Trail, shout out 90s kids. You're just a couple of you. You're gonna just step into the river. But God says, I'm gonna hold up the river when you step into it, but not a moment before. Not until you put your foot in the water am I gonna hold up the water. And so the priests holding the Ark of the Covenant are like, okay, he hasn't failed us before, guess we'll do this. And they take a step, and as soon as they step into the water, the river holds up and the people can go across. But not until they take that first step does the power of God intervene and meet them there. And here's what that means for our lives. When we live on mission and we take a step of faith or obedience, the power of God will meet us and empower us there. The Spirit will come and be present with us there, but not until we take the step. Not until we go where God has called us to go and do what God has called us to do. Again, you may feel inadequate, but you will never be alone. Expect power when you live on this mission. Third expectation, expect to be treated like Jesus. Expect to be treated like Jesus. Verse 24, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor is a servant above his master. It's enough for the disciple to be like his teacher and the servant to be like his master. If they've called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? Here's what Jesus is saying. A disciple is not above his teacher. In other words, one of the goals of discipleship is to become like Jesus, which means this. If we live like Jesus, we will get treated like Jesus was treated. How was Jesus treated? Misunderstood, opposed, beaten, killed, mocked. That's how he was treated. And so if we are really gonna follow Jesus, we can't expect that we're gonna have the universal applause of the world, right? We will be treated like he was treated. And so Jesus says to expect that. If he got that as our teacher, we as his students will be treated the same way. Here's the temptation. This is like a lot of bad news I've given you so far, right? Like you're gonna be opposed and mocked and all. Like this is hard. So here's the temptation. I'll keep my faith, I'll keep Jesus, but I'll just keep it private. I won't live on mission like this. And you can do that. You can live like that as a follower of Jesus. Here's the only problem. If we live like that, we will know a lot less risk, but we will also know a lot less of Jesus. Because one of the ways that we become like him, and one of the ways that he meets us, is when we live on mission with him. The heart of the gospel is, of course, that Jesus died for us. That's the heart of the gospel. But one of the things I'm loving about Jesus more and more, the older I get and the more I live life, is that Jesus also understands us. Like when I feel misunderstood or lonely or accused or whatever it is, it has comforted me so much recently to realize I have a God in heaven who looks down and says, I know exactly what that feels like. Exactly. And just that Jesus meets me in that moment, that's just become really powerful to me. And so translate that to living on mission. When you live on mission and people oppose you and you're marginalized for what you believe or you're mocked for the way you live your life or whatever it is, you have a God in heaven who looks at that moment and says to you, I know exactly what that feels like. I walked this path before you. We're become like Jesus, and we should be expected to be treated like Jesus. Expectation number 4, expect fear, but take courage. Expect fear, but take courage. I'm going to read verses 26 to 33 for us, and I want you to see in here that the disciples start to fear. Of course they do. Jesus is saying, people will oppose you. You're sending out like sheep in the midst of wolves. They get scared. And so Jesus gives them 3 reasons not to fear as they live this mission. Verse 26, but have no fear of them, for nothing that is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven. 3 reasons to take courage and not fear. First of all, take courage because God will vindicate you. Verse 26, have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. My least favorite kind of movies are the movies where somebody gets accused at the beginning of a crime that they didn't commit, and you know that as the audience, but the people nobody else in the movie knows that. It gives me like severe anxiety to watch. I hate those movies. I think of like The Fugitive or whatever. Like, I don't know, maybe you've got other examples of that. You're just watching the whole time, waiting for the truth to finally be revealed and for this person to get vindicated and for my heart rate to go down. Like, that's all, that's all I want. And Jesus is saying here, that's how all of history is moving. There is a truth that's underlying all of reality, and it's God's kingdom through the gospel of Jesus. But it's kind of not known in the world we live in. It's not always experienced. It's not always felt. It's not always believed. But a day is coming when all that is secret will be revealed, when every knee will bow before Jesus, where every tongue will confess that he is Lord. And so Jesus is saying to us, you may be rejected, you may be opposed, people may not believe what you say, but there's coming a day when everything that is true will be seen. God already knows how this story ends, so don't be afraid to proclaim it now. Number 2, take courage because your greatest treasure cannot be taken away. Jesus says, don't fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Here's the question to consider in this section. Who holds the controlling power in your life? Really just 2 options. Fear of God or fear of man. Is it trying to please man and live for the applause of people and for the validation of people? Is that the controlling factor in your life? Or is living for God and his applause and his reality, is that the controlling power in your life? Jesus is not trying to pretend suffering isn't real. He's not trying to say people can't hurt you. They can. They can damage your reputation. They can even take your life. But ultimately, he says, their power is limited. All the best things in your life are untouchable. Your forgiveness, your inheritance, your eternity, your sonship, all untouchable. I love Jonathan Edwards preached a sermon one time, and here were his first 3 sermon points, or not first 3, here was 3 sermon points in that sermon. He says, our bad things will ultimately work out for our good. Our good things can never be taken away, and our best things are yet to come. Our good things can never be taken away. No matter what anybody does to you on earth, no matter how life goes for you, your good things can never be taken away. And so who's the controlling power in your life? And number 3, we take courage because our Father cares for us. You can sometimes we have to imagine the scene as Jesus is teaching. He's outside teaching these disciples about this, and you can imagine him looking around and seeing birds flying around. And he's like, these birds, nobody cares about birds, right? Like if you pass a bird on the way out today and it was dead on the sidewalk, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't even think twice about it, right? But Jesus is saying the reality is that God knows that bird. He cares for it. He says he knows every hair on your head. He can number it. Just imagine that. For some of you, that's harder than others. But he can number every hair on your head. And the principle is this: if God cares about those small things, how much more does he care about you and your life? How much more does he watch over you and protect you and care for you? And then he finishes with this great promise. He says, everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. As soon as I read that verse this week, I started thinking about when I go pick up my kids from school. I love picking up my kids from school whenever I get a chance. And I put the car tag, in the thing, and it says their last name on it, and it's the identification saying, those kids are mine, they belong to me. And I just love watching them come out of school and they're tired from the day, but they see the car and they get so excited. And just that moment that I'm their dad acknowledging this is my kid and I get to come pick them up. And I just thought about this eternal perspective that when you finally make it home and you make it towards your Father, it's as if Jesus has the car tag with your name on it and says, that one belongs to me. They're with me. He says, anyone who acknowledges me on earth, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. Anything you do in this life that feels hard and feels like you get rejected or opposed or mocked or whatever for it, it pales in comparison to the moment when your Savior will look at you and say, that one belongs to me. I acknowledge them. I love them. I know them. Number 5, expectation. Expect division. Expect division. Verse 21, brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death. Do not think I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set man against his father, and daughter against her mother, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. That one's not as hard to imagine as the rest of them. But and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Jesus has already said opposition could come from the outside, but now he's saying don't be surprised when opposition also comes from the inside. He says, I've come to earth not to bring peace, but to bring a sword. I've been to a lot of your houses. I haven't seen that cross-stitched on any pillows on your bed. Well, I haven't been in your bedroom, but I'm assuming that's not cross-stitched. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. This is the Prince of Peace talking like this. What's he saying? He's saying that his claims about reality and about eternity are so divisive. There is no neutrality. You fall one way or another on Jesus, and that can divide even down the line of households. And some of you have experienced this. You have broken relationships with your parents or with your kids or with your siblings or whoever because you have attached yourself to Jesus and he has divided you relationally. That's a reality for so many people in this room and so many people in the world. We shouldn't be surprised, Jesus says, when some of the deepest wounds come from the people we would have expected to love us the most. But then he goes after our hearts. He says in verse 37, whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son and daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Here's the point that he's trying to make. The point is not to stop loving your families. The Bible is consistent that we should love and honor our families. The question is, who do we love most? Jesus says, if he's not first in our love, in our heart's affections, everything else gets out of order. C.S. Lewis says it this way, put first things first, and we get second things thrown in. Put second things first, and we lose both first and second things. If we put love of family over love of Jesus, we will never love our family well. The reason is your family, your spouse, your kids, your parents, whatever, they cannot bear the weight of being your God. They cannot do it. You will suffocate them. But if you get that order right and you love Jesus above all things, counterintuitively, it allows you to love your family like you've never loved them before. And so Jesus says, make sure you get that order right. Only he can carry that weight. Here's the question he leaves us with. When following him costs the approval of someone we deeply love, will we believe he is still worth it? Number 6, expectation. These are hard, I know. Verse 38, whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. You know, we put crosses like on pulpits, decorate churches like this. I've seen a couple crosses on chains this morning on necklaces. I just want you to imagine if someone in the first century saw you with a necklace with a cross on it. It would be the same as today as if you saw someone with a necklace with like a lethal injection needle on it. It is an instrument of torture and of death, right? And we're just sort of like, it's a symbol of our faith, and so it's kind of cool with us. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Jesus, when Jesus says, pick up your cross, what he's calling us to is daily death, to die to our preferences and our comfort. to die every single day to ourselves and to our reputation. And then he gives this incredible promise. He says, whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Here's the paradoxical nature of the kingdom that Jesus is bringing. He says, if we try to pursue comfort and safety and security as our highest goals, we will lose the very life that we're trying to protect. But if we follow him wherever he leads and trust him, we will discover the life that we most deeply want. I love the Joseph Son is a great example of this. Joseph Son, pastor in Romania during communist persecution in the 1970s. He was arrested, beaten, abused, threatened for preaching the gospel. I'm going to read you this account of him in an interrogation room with 6 communist police officers arrested for preaching the gospel. It's a little long, but it'll be on the screen. I want to read you, thinking about whoever gives his life for my sake will gain it. Joseph Son recounts one time being interrogated by 6 men. He says this, what is taking place here is not an encounter between you and me. This is an encounter between my God and me. The interrogators looked puzzled. Son said, my God is teaching me a lesson through you. I don't know what it is. Maybe he wants to teach me several lessons. I only know, sirs, that you will only do to me what God wants you to do to me, and you will not go 1 inch further because you are only an instrument of my God. One communist interrogator said to Pastor Son, don't you realize I have the power to kill you? Son said, but do you realize that I have the power to die? Let me explain how I see this issue. Your supreme weapon is killing. My supreme weapon is dying. Here's how it works. You know that my sermons on tape have spread all over the country. If you kill me, those sermons will be sprinkled with my blood. Everybody will know that I died for my preaching, and everyone who had a tape will pick it up and say, I better listen again what this man's preached because he really meant it. He sealed it with his life. So, sir, my sermons will speak 10 times louder than before. I will actually rejoice in this supreme victory if you kill me. After I said this, the interrogator sent me home. Another officer who was interrogating a pastor friend of mine told him, we know Mr. Son would love to be a martyr, but we are not that foolish to fulfill his wish. Son writes, I stopped to consider the meaning of that statement. I remembered how for many years I had been afraid of dying, so I kept a low profile. Because I wanted so badly to live, I had wasted my life in inactivity. But now that I had placed my life on the altar and decided I was ready to die for the gospel, they were telling me they would not kill me. I could go wherever I wanted to go in the country and preach whatever I wanted, knowing I was safe. As long as I tried to save my life, I was losing it. Now that I was willing to lose my life, I found it. You probably are not going to get arrested on your way out of worship today. Probably. Let's hope not. But every day you're giving smaller opportunities to die, to your comfort, to your convenience, to your pride, to your reputation, to your sense of control. And every little death is an opportunity to discover that Jesus was telling the truth. Whoever loses his life for his sake will find it. And then lastly, expect reward. Expect reward. Verse 40. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. The one who receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and the one who receives a righteous person because he's a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. Listen to this verse. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. One final expectation that Jesus wants to give to his disciples is this. No sacrifice, no act of faithfulness, no act of obedience, seen or unseen in your life is overlooked by God in heaven. Every single one of them will be rewarded. And so that empowers us to live on mission that our God sees and our God rewards. I love that he says, if you give somebody a cup of cold water, I'll reward that. Like sometimes it can get overwhelming because I'm reading you accounts of like guys in a Romanian, prison and stuff and talking about missionaries going overseas. And you're like, I do not do any of that. I'm just trying to raise kids and make sure like they survive the day. That's like all I'm trying to do. But the principle still remains that if you give your life for Jesus, no matter how small, you will be rewarded. 200 years ago, one young couple believed every word that Jesus said in this passage and that he meant it. In 1812, Adoniram and Ann Judson boarded a ship to Burma, which is now Myanmar, and to go be some of the first missionaries sent from the United States overseas to proclaim Christ. And Adoniram wrote a letter to Ann's dad with the expectations for her life as a missionary in Burma. And I just want you to listen to this and imagine if this was your daughter and this man was asking to marry your daughter and take her on this mission. Here's what he says. I have now to ask whether you can consent to part with your daughter early next spring, to see her no more in this world. Whether you can consent to her departure and her subjection to the hardships and sufferings of missionary life. Whether you can consent to her exposure of the danger of the ocean, to the fatal influence of the southern climate of India, to every kind of want and distress, to degradation, insult, persecution, and perhaps a violent death. Can you consent to all this for the sake of him who left his heavenly home and died for her and for you, for the sake of perishing immortal souls, for the sake of the glory of God? Can you consent to all this in hope of soon meeting your daughter in the world of glory with the crown of righteousness, brightened by the acclamations of praise, which shall resound to her Savior from the heathen, saved through her means, from eternal woe and despair? I mean, when I with my father-in-law, I was painting the rosiest picture possible of the life for his daughter, right? And this guy says, I'm going to marry her and take her into unconscionable things. She died at 36. Her dad would never see her again, giving her life away to proclaim the gospel to unreached people. And today, partly because of their missionary efforts in Burma, Myanmar, there are over 500,000 Christians in a Buddhist country. Gave her life away. Her dad said yes to that. I mean, that's incredible to me. And so here's the summary question of the whole passage. I know it was a lot. I know it was hard. Part of preaching through books of the Bible is we come to passages like this and we don't try to dress up what Jesus says. These are the expectations that he gives to us when we join him on mission. The question for each of us is this: knowing what it may cost, do we still believe he's worth it? And will we join him? So consider those expectations and consider your Savior who calls you to come with him so that you can become more like him. Let's pray.